any team has a chance when I'm on the team, but I know every team has a chance if Steph's on the team. So I get to play Robin. That's my Batman.
Happy NBA playoffs, everyone. The Warriors are finally playing playoff basketball for the first time in 2 years. What an up and down season it was, starting out 12-3, then going 13-22 before the trade deadline, then trading for Jimmy Butler, finishing the season 23-9, closing it out with an incredible 121-116 win over the Grizzlies in the play-in. How are we feeling about the Dubs, Satchel?
I'm feeling pretty good. It's been such a roller coaster ride, but it's funny, the last time you had me on, I said that Houston was their best first round matchup, and here we are. So I feel like, all things considered, they're in a good spot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think Houston, outside of the Grizzlies, were always the team I was kind of targeting. And 2 weeks ago, when they lose to Houston in Golden State, it was kind of a little bit of a wake-up call. And I was like, do I actually want this team? But I think the shooting of the Rockets, the lack of offensive firepower, how young the roster is, I think is going to play big factors, particularly as the series gets late and in crunch time. But we'll get into that in a little bit. I want to start with just touching on the Grizzlies game. It's been a couple days now, so maybe some of the excitement, some of the hype around the game is died down a little bit, but it would be an injustice to not talk about the 75 from Steph and Jimmy combined. Batman and Robin, a little playoff Jimmy has returned. I think it was a lot of playoff Jimmy at the start of the game. He pretty much carried the offense the first 3 quarters of the game. He was scoring from the post, from the paint. He even hit, I think, 2 threes, which we didn't see pretty much the entire regular season. And then, Steph did his thing. He had a little Curry flurry in the fourth quarter, making a couple of huge threes in crunch time. He had that triple pump fake over Scottie Pippen to pretty much seal the game at the end. There was a couple, funky fouls at the end. I don't know if funky or terrible is the right word to use. But yeah, there was a couple that, if this was a loss, I think that's probably what we'd open the show with. We can kind of move past those knowing the Warriors won. This team, to me, feels like it's a little bit of Giants torture from the early 2010s. The Giants, always had this moniker. While they were winning World Series, they always knew how to make it as stressful and as strenuous as possible. We saw that in 2014 in Game 7, where 2 outs in the 9th, 1 out away from winning the World Series. It's that single that turns into 2 errors, and before you know it, Alex Gordon's on third base, and the Giants are about to blow Game 7 of the World Series. But they won. I think that's all that matters. Where do you think this team would have been without Jimmy Butler?
I think without Jimmy, they probably don't make the playoffs. I don't even know if they make the play-in, because they were tanking hard. It seemed like there was something not working. I don't know. The vibes weren't necessarily great. I'm sure we'll get into it later too, but some of it also was that, they were relying on Jonathan Kuminga, and he got hurt. And that is the thing, is Jimmy has kind of stepped into his area a little bit and has done greatly. We'll see what that all looks like. But I think Jimmy really saved the season. And I think that's the biggest thing that I think is going to help them going through the playoffs, not just having Jimmy, but the playoff Jimmy factor, in the sense that none of these teams have seen playoff Jimmy, both like in the regular season because he was playing differently, but also because he was in the Eastern Conference. None of these teams have really had to deal with playoff Jimmy before, and the different things that presents, both as a scorer, as a playmaker, as just one of the highest IQ basketball players, along with Steph and Draymond. I think that was the biggest thing that stood out to me from that Memphis game is, it was up and down. Like, they probably should have put it away early, but in those final moments, for the most part, Steph, Draymond, and Jimmy were just able to pick them apart and get easy looks. And I just wanted to say this, because I feel like one thing that like people really harped on was Jimmy's turnover late in the game. But in that moment, he was trying to find Steph, and Steph was literally like shoved to the ground. And so I'm not worried about that in the long term. Like, I think he was making the right play, and you can only do so much when Steph gets thrown to the ground and there's no foul call given. But I think those 3 guys closing games, if they're within 5 points down the stretch of any playoff game, I feel good.
You can't even give him that much of a hard time with the turnover. Like, he's been leading the team in assists since he's joined. Like, that's just par for the course, especially with this Warriors team. And I want to get into that I think turnovers are going to be a critical component with this Rockets series. Last note I have on the Grizzlies, and it's not even about the basketball game itself. But for the Warrior fans that will be going to playoff games this next couple, hopefully weeks, hopefully months, wear the damn shirts. They give them to you for free for a reason. They looked electric in the early 2010s dynasty when every single person in Oracle Arena was wearing the shirts. It was just a vibrant, hype, like, it's a more intimidating, maybe I'm going too far in the weeds and I want to get into the actual basketball part of it, but dude, I get you're in tech and I get you make $200K a year, but like, you don't need to wear the tech vests and the Gucci and the Balenciaga like to the game. You can wear the yellow jerseys with the people in the upper bowl, and also just don't miss the first 5 minutes of the third quarter because you're at the bar. Like, you're going to a Warrior game, you're paying hundreds of, probably thousands of dollars if you're going to be in the lower bowl. Like, show up, show out. I know it's a little bit of a sidetrack right now, but like, we got a couple months of playoff basketball hopefully ahead of us, and I'm going to be screaming at my TV if the third quarter starts and the lower bowl is half empty and the ones that are in their seats are in their suits or in their tech vests.
That's something that, like, even like during their 22 championship run didn't really happen. I understood, like why wouldn't you do it?
You think you're too good for it? Like,
yeah, well, it's even that. It's like some people are in their whatever their nice clothes, but some people are also just in like other Warriors gear. And I'm like, if you're already wearing Warriors gear, why not just put on the shirt? It could do a whole podcast on the difference between Chase Center and Oracle, but it's interesting because I think Chase Center can still get there, not all the way there, but it can do its thing when it needs to. But in terms of a consistency thing,
it's no Oracle Arena. Yeah,
no, definitely not.
It's no
Definitely
Oracle
not.
Arena.
I know it's funny. There's been some clips of Oracle during that first Steph Curry Warriors playoff run against the Nuggets and the Spurs circulating that I rewatched today, and it's never going to reach that level. But you know, they can still have a home court advantage if the people who show up actually give a shit.
Yeah, show up, give a shit, act like you're spending a couple $100s. I mean, like, you see those crowds in Europe, like the ones Jokic grew up playing in. Not only are they all wearing the same shit, but they are so locked in and so loud. And it's like an intimidating, like, make the Chase Center like old Oracle Arena. Make it an intimidating, hard place to play. Like, the Rockets have 3 key guys in the rotation that are under 22 years old. Like, make these guys a little bit intimidated. But let's get into actual basketball. That's my rant for the day. Moving into the Rockets part of this series. Warriors went 3-1 against the Rockets this year. They lost the most recent one, though, 2 weeks ago. We touched on at home. Let me start off by saying I think the Rockets defensively are going to be a problem for this Warriors team. But we've seen time and time again that regular season success does not translate to playoff success. And particularly with the Warriors, like, we've seen them struggle in these play-in, these single game eliminations. I think because they're a little older, they might not have the speed and athleticism to match in a one-game series. But what makes them so good and what has made them this like dynastic run is their ability to make game plan changes during a series. They're a smart veteran team. They know how to adapt as the series progresses. We saw this like 10 years ago with Memphis in 2015, with OKC in 2016. We saw it 2 years ago in Boston, where this team goes down in the series. They're able to kind of adapt, make game plan adjustments. I think that's going to be huge. Everyone says strength in numbers. That's a little bit of a cliche at this point, but playoffs are a war of attrition. Like, these are going to be a 2.5 month sprint if the Warriors are able to get to where they want to be. And you're not going to be able to live with an 8-man rotation, especially when you're playing every other night, as they're going to be doing later on in the series. So I'm excited. Any early takeaways from that series?
Houston's athleticism could be problematic. I think the biggest thing is they're going to have to get back in transition, because I think because the Rockets struggle so much in the half court, if you're not scoring, then you're going to have to be back in transition. Don't let them get easy baskets and make it hard for them. I think also, honestly, the thing I'm most interested to see is truly like how game one plays out. Because the Rockets are so young, they've never really been there before. If the Warriors come out and take game one on their home floor, I'm really interested to see how that young team responds to that. Because, you know, the Warriors aren't going to be phased. At least the main guys on the Warriors aren't going to be phased by that environment. Steph, you know, loves shooting in that arena. Had some great moments there.
Lots of experiences in Houston, especially for the older guys that have been on that roster for 10 plus years.
So I think that's the biggest thing. And then maybe we just get into it now. We'll have to see what Jonathan Kuminga's role is, if at all, during this series, and I think they probably will need his athleticism, but we'll see. We'll see what happens there. I mean, there were some reports today. I believe it was Tim Kawakami saying he's probably not going to be on the team next year, which can get us into a whole different set of dialogue on his whole tenure here. But while he is here, we'll have to see how much they use him.
Wow. So we made it 11 and a half minutes before we started talking about Jonathan Kuminga. I'm honestly impressed. I thought that might lead the show. I wanted to wait as long as possible about it because it's probably one of the only perceived negatives going on with this team right now. But let's get into it. He had three of his best games this season against the Rockets. Granted, two of them were games Steph didn't play, and he was able to really kind of take control of the offense. He was playing this like Zion, Giannis, heliocentric offense where he was really just like prioritizing his ability to drive in the lane, kick out. So his 3 games against Houston, he had 20, 23, and 33. I think, like you said, his athleticism is going to be much needed against a hyper athletic Houston team. I think Steve Kerr is going to give him a little bit more of a leash in this series. And hey, he hasn't played the last 2 games, which have been in a way single game eliminations. The Clippers was to get into the playoffs without the play-in, lose that one. And then against the Grizzlies, obviously, we all knew the stakes. Winner, not go home, but winner have to play on Friday, have a back-to-back, and then end up playing OKC, which I think would have ultimately been a quick playoff exit for the Warriors. But yeah, I think Steve Kerr is going to have a little more trust in him in a 7-game series and give him a little bit of a leash. I mean, if he's playing poorly in game 1, he might get yanked and not play. But I do think he's going to play in game 1 because they're going to need his speed, his athleticism, his size. What I think is more important than even his offense is that he's able to play really good defense, take one of their best perimeter shooters one-on-one, and also rebound the ball. The Warriors are going to struggle to rebound. That's probably going to be their biggest kryptonite in the series. The Rockets have the best rebounding percentage in the league and have by far the best offensive rebounding percentage in the league. They rebound about 35% of their misses. And, they have a 7-footer in Şengün. They have Steven Adams coming off the bench. And that's going to be tough for the Warriors. Like, they have Kevon Looney, they have Quinn Post, and then the majority of the time it's going to be Draymond Green at 6'6", playing that center position. So I really think if Kuminga's able to just play smarter, you talked about this in the last podcast we did, not miss those wide open back cuts and kind of lock in defensively and then go after the rebounds both offensively and defensively, he will have a role on this team. Do you think we see Quentin Post at all?
I do, just because Houston's so good defensively, the Warriors are going to need whatever they can get on offense. And I think his offensive game is important to the team right now. He can stretch the floor. Putting him in a pick and pop situation with Steph makes it a little bit harder to guard because you can't necessarily just leave him wide open, or you can and just live with it, but he'll probably knock down some shots. So I think we will see Quentin Post. I don't know how long it'll be, just because we'll see how he handles some of the bigs for the Rockets. But I think he did a decent job against Memphis. He was in there against Edey. He wasn't afraid when Zach Edey tried to dunk on him, and then he went back the other way and knocked down a 3. So I think he'll be out there. He's not going to back down from any challenges. And that's the thing, is most of the guys the Warriors are going to put out there are guys who are at least they're gonna give it their all. They're not going to back down. We'll see how well they play, but I don't necessarily worry about anybody on this team being intimidated by anything.
I hope he's not intimidated, because I think Quentin Post could be a huge role player in this series. His ability to shoot is going to kind of pull bigs, pull Şengün, pull Steven Adams away from the offensive glass. He's going to be able to help with rebounds, as we mentioned. That's going to be an issue for the Warriors. And, his defense is probably his biggest liability. But like you touched on, the Rockets are 22nd in the league in half-court offense. And your defense is not quite as important against a bad half-court offense. Like, I think if the Rockets were able to shoot like a OKC or even like a Lakers, he might have a harder time getting into the rotation, because he might miss rotations and cuts that if you leave a wide open shooter open, they're going to hit. But with a Rockets team that is a pretty below average offensive team, I think that might be less of an issue. I think the Warriors are going to need a lot more from their role players, the Pods, the Moody, the GP2, the Post, the Kumingas of the world, than they had in the plan to have like a sustainable offense. The Rockets are going to leave these guys open. They're going to put extra attention on Steph, on Jimmy, and they're going to put like a Jalen Green on Brandon Podziemski. That's going to be up to Brandon Podziemski to hit those open threes and to drive to the basket And those guys really didn't do all that much in the play-in. Like Moody played great defense, but it took 75 from Steph and Jimmy to barely squeak out that win against the Grizzlies. So I think the role players are going to be huge and really, really need to step up this series.
The biggest one that I've circled is Moses Moody, because I think he's going to get a lot of open looks from three, and he's going to have to knock down some shots for the Warriors to be successful, not only in this series, but going forward. That was, I think, something that a lot of teams were doing, was they were kind of living and dying with Moses Moody threes. And I think if you're the Warriors, it's not necessarily a bad option, but he's been hot and cold lately. And so I think offensively, Moses Moody's 3-point shot is going to be a huge difference maker for the Warriors, and hopefully he can knock down some shots. Because, I mean, he has been a decent shooter for most of the season, but he's been so up and down that, there's going to be some variance there. But also with what he gives on the defensive end, I think Moses Moody is the guy that I've circled for this series.
Completely agree. And he's going to be, I think, have the opportunities to score. I expect the Rockets to put Şengün on him to kind of hide Şengün on the Warriors, least important offensive player. So that's an opportunity to kind of maybe even get Şengün into foul trouble. But without burying the lead, I think the Rockets' star power, and we've touched on this a little bit, is their defensive talent. They held the Warriors to under 100 points in 3 of the 4 games this season. Their defense allowed like 107 points per game, which is the 3rd best in the NBA. We touched on how good of a rebounding team they are. One key for me, and we saw this 2 weeks ago with Steph going 1 for 8 against the Rockets, scoring 3 points, his worst offensive output of the season, is Amen Thompson is the best perimeter defender in the league. I would say that is not much of an argument. Dyson Daniels maybe is the only other guy I'd put in that case. I think Draymond deserves depoy this year, but a lot of that is because his ability to match up 1 through 5. But Amen Thompson on a smaller guard is going to be exhausting for Steph. And he is a 21-year-old. He's going to have all the energy in the world to kind of follow Steph around. And I think that's going to be important for the Warriors, is to find ways to get switches and get Amen Thompson and even Dylan Brooks off of Curry.
It's funny looking at Amen Thompson. You're just like, why can't Jonathan Kuminga do that? They're
Right.
They have the same level of athleticism, but the give a shit factor is just a little bit higher, it seems. But I mean, that is going to be a huge thing. I think to some extent, I think Steph is just going to have to go at him, and I do think in a 7-game series that's going to be less of an issue. Like Steph's going to score on anybody, but they are going to have to hunt some matchups, probably set some screens with whoever Jalen Green is guarding, or maybe Fred VanVleet, just because he's a bit smaller, and do what they can.
Don't even remind me of that MFer.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about Fred VanVleet.
Turning into Stephen Curry in the 2019 finals, but
yeah, the guy was just chucking up bullshit and it was going in, but we don't need to talk about that. And so I think, they are going to have to try to manipulate some matchups and stuff. Yes, he is 21 and he is going to have a lot of energy and high motor, but still guarding Steph Curry in a 7-game series is hard for anyone. You hear people who've guarded him just in regular season games and especially in postseason series talk about it afterwards. They're like, I've never been more tired in my life.
Talk to Matthew Dellavedova about that one.
Yeah.
Almost died guarding Steph Curry.
Exactly. So, I mean, I do think Amen Thompson's going to give him a good series, but at the end of the day, pretty much no one is in as good a shape as Steph. You hear stories about people who work out with him over the summer and they're like, I tapped out, I threw up. Like, he's going to present a challenge, but I think he's going to get tired throughout the series. I know he's 21, but Steph runs more than anybody.
Yeah, we're still talking about Steph after all. I've seen some stuff online, some Houston articles, and they're like, we found the Steph stopper. And it's like, good luck, dude. I remember the Grizzlies saying that in 2015 with Tony Allen, or the Celtics saying that in 2022 with Marcus Smart, who is coming off a depoy. Like, Steph Curry is going to find ways to score, kind of just draw attention off ball. Like, you can, do as best as you can on ball and force him into tough shots, but like, you're going to be chasing him around all game long. And if you're really just putting Amen Thompson to almost play like a box and one and say you're guarding Steph Curry and you're not worrying about anything else, like, what's going to happen when Jimmy draws 2 or when Pods is wide open from 3? Like, they have options around Steph, and that's going back to that point about just the role players stepping up will be huge because they are going to put so much energy and so much focus on stopping Steph. Another key I see in this series is Rockets are 13-1 when Jalen Green has 30-plus points. He, to me, is the Rockets' X factor. The Warriors need to just force him into a lot of tough shots. He's not a great defender, and he has a tendency to sometimes shot jack even when his shot's not going in. So if the Warriors are able to kind of force him into tough situations, he's missing assignments defensively. I wouldn't be surprised if Ime Udoka eventually starts cutting his minutes. So that's going to be a huge one to me is finding guys outside of Jalen Green to score and to get shots up.
We'll probably see Draymond on Şengün most of the series, and that's going to be what it is. I think Draymond will do a pretty solid job. At first, you want to like live and die with him shooting jump shots because, you know, he is so athletic, and depending on how much Kuminga plays, the Warriors don't necessarily have an athlete who can keep up with him. I think you're just going to have to live and die with him shooting jump shots because if he gets to the rim, he's going to finish. He's, I think, one of the biggest guys you look at and you're like, he could be such a high variance player for the Rockets in this series. Young guy, never been to the playoffs before, and does have a tendency to just shoot himself and his team out of games from time to time. And so I think that's the real thing is going to be seeing how he handles this environment. Warriors probably also want to put some pressure on him. You know, the last time the Warriors and Rockets played, both teams had a lot of turnovers. The Warriors have always been a high turnover team, but I think the Rockets have a potential to also give the ball up here and there. And so I think that's going to be a big thing too, is to see if they can turn them over, if they can get Jalen Green out of a rhythm. I said this before, but I think that's the biggest thing I'm interested to see is just what the mentality of this Houston team is as the series progresses and as how do they handle adversity.
That is going to be interesting because, as you touched on, the Warriors, if they go down 0-1, which I hope they don't because this is a team that, you know, want to make as streamlined of a series as possible. If it goes 5 and they're able to have 5 days off before the next series, that would be awesome. You touched on it a little bit about transition and about turnovers. I do think, you know, the Warriors' ability to cause turnovers is going to be important. But on the flip side of things, the Rockets, like we mentioned, are 12th in the league in transition offense. They're like 22nd in half-court offense, and they're like bottom 10 in three-point makes and three-point percentage. So not allowing them to get those easy buckets in transition, I think, are going to be really important. And we know that from Steph Curry from Warrior teams in the past that like turnovers are oftentimes one of the biggest hindrances on this team, on their success, and just limiting them and not allowing Houston to get in a rhythm and get easy buckets, I think is going to be important. Do you see Buddy Hield playing in this series?
I think he's going to play not a lot. You know, you already saw in the play-in, he had kind of a reduced role. They'll put him out there, honestly, similarly to Jonathan Kuminga. I think they're going to throw him out there. But if he goes out there and he looks lost or he's just chucking shit up, I think the leash is going to be shorter for him too, just because if he's not scoring, he's not really providing much for the team. And so if he goes out there and he gives up a couple blow-bys and he's not knocking down shots, I expect and at least hope that, honestly, he's not out there that much. If Buddy can go out there and knock down 3 or 4 threes, that would be huge. But if he's not going to do that, then really he doesn't have much use to this team.
Yeah, I see it being like 10 to 15 minutes. If he's making his shots, like you said, give him 20 minutes. But maybe I'm optimistic. He has had a pretty poor second half, but I think the Buddy Hield game is coming. Eventually, we have to get a 3-4 made threes in the game. And maybe I'm wrong and being optimistic, but like this is one of the best 3-point shooters of the last 15 years. And you'd like to think that eventually he's going to kind of get hot, catch rhythm, but we'll see. This is a lot of guys that we're kind of talking about getting minutes now. You got your starting 5, and then we're talking about Buddy, Kuminga. I still see Guy playing because of his size and how just aggressive and how much of a badass he is on the offensive boards. And then you got Looney, who I'm not sure how much of a role Looney will have. I think the Warriors are going to try to go small and run Steven Adams off the court, and I think that's kind of where you see Looney fading away too. But on the flip side, maybe they'll need him because of how small they are and because of how good of a rebounding team Houston is.
I think that Looney's going to get some run. But yeah, you're going to try to run Steven Adams off the floor, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Kevon Looney's not out there. You know, that means you're using Kevon Looney to get Steven Adams into a pick and roll where Steph can just go at him. I still have memories of the 2016 Western Conference Finals, and there's so many highlights of Steph just going one-on-one with Steven Adams. I think the Warriors are going to try to make that happen as much as possible as long as he's out on the floor. But you also want Kevon Looney's bulk out there to, you know, try his best with Steven Adams, who's, as we know, a massive human, who's also from a family of about 20 massive humans.
Yeah,
so, I mean, you know, he's got a special kind of scrap. But I think also you're going to want Kevon Looney out there just to have a steady veteran presence from time to time. Someone who's been there, done that, and yeah, you're going to need help on the boards, and so sometimes you're just going to have to throw out all the tall guys you got.
There's a lot of fun narratives in this series. Steven Adams, Draymond Green from 9 years ago, Draymond back-to-back games, kicking him in the balls. You got GP2's revenge on Dylan Brooks for that dirty play in 22, breaking his arm. You got Ime Udoka's revenge against the Warriors from the finals. Like, there's a lot of fun narratives and a lot of history between these two teams. And the Warriors beat them in 2015, 2016, 2018, 2019 to end the Rockets season. Do you have a favorite memory out of those 4 playoff series?
I do. Before we do that, I want to just touch on some of the narratives, because I think something that is maybe getting lost in all this, right, is Ime Udoka win at Steph the last time these two teams played. You mentioned earlier people are already anointing Amen Thompson the Steph stopper. And let's not pretend that Steph isn't aware of all this, And I
Petty
think
King.
yeah, right? Like, that's the thing I'm most excited for, is Steph, like, hearing Ime Udoka basically, I think, call him soft. Anytime there's ever been an anointed Steph stopper, he's dropped like 35, 40 on their head. And so I'm excited to see a motivated Steph just come out and just go crazy and start pointing at people and,
I'm fired up. Like you said, he loves playing in Houston. He's a lot of great memories there.
Yeah.
Completely agree.
And so along those lines, I think my favorite Warriors Rockets memory, I'll let you have, I think, the one that most people will say. My personal one, the 2018 Western Conference Finals. I went to Game 3 with my grandma on her birthday.
Oh, that's awesome.
And the Warriors won that game by 40. It was just like a party all day. That was the game where Sean Livingston crossed up James Harden. And at that point, they were already up like 35 points. And it was just a good time. And sorry, Grandma, I did have to give away the shirt. I held onto the shirt for so long. But those things, they come in like an XL. And I'm already not an XL. And after so many washes, they don't fit anymore.
Right.
But I held on to it for as long as I could.
I'm the opposite. I need to throw them in the dryer like 4 or 5 times over just for them to not look like a pajama on me. But yeah, that's an awesome one. As you know, we both know how that series goes. The Warriors go down 3-2. Chris Paul strains his hamstring like he always does. Warriors win game 6, and then Rockets are up 15 at halftime in game 7. I remember where I was. I was in my college dorm room watching with my buddies who were not Warriors or Rocket fans, but were Warrior haters. So they were loving it and making sure I was aware of every 3 James Harden was making. And then we know how the second half went. Rockets missed 27 straight threes. Warriors end up winning by like 5. So my favorite is the year after in 2019, when in game 6, Warriors are up 3-2 in Houston. Steph's held scoreless in the first half. And I remember being on Twitter that night, and there's lots of people hating on Steph, and whatever negative narratives they had around him were well out in the open then. And he answers. He has 33 in the second half in game 6 in Houston, ends up winning the game. And it was just a prime Steph Curry game where when you think he's down and doesn't have a good shooting game, he figures out ways to get out. I think he had 23 in the fourth quarter. There's so many good Rockets memories because we beat them in 4 playoff series in the last 10 years, but that's number 1 for me.
I think that one has to be the pick, right? It's one of the great all-time Steph games. One of the great all-time Steph shots, that sidestep 3 he hit over PJ Tucker, who was a great defender, but Steph had him in hell in that second half. That's another great moment for the Petty King. That was the day before the game. Chris Paul had kicked him off the practice court because he wanted the time. And I remember, Steph talking about that after the game, yelling, "Kick me off the court again! Kick me off the court again!" So I'm looking forward to the return of the Petty King.
I know Chris Paul played a year on the Warriors last year, and he was fine. He was decent, but I still hate on that guy. He's so annoying, and I appreciate what he did in a pretty lost season of last year, but he's the most annoying, obnoxious poker out there. So let's talk about the betting odds a little bit on this series. So the Warriors right now have moved from minus 200, which is about 66% probability, to minus 175, closer to 63%. So still big favorites, and a 3% swing isn't that big of a difference, but it kind of signifies that when the market opened to now, sharper bettors have identified some value with the Rockets and might see the series being a little closer than what it initially was projected to be. It's about a 66% implied probability to go 6+ games. So I think we're expecting to see not a quick 4 or 5 game series. It's going to be a unique matchup just on both sides because they're so different and at such different points in their career. The Warriors are also the second team ever to be a 7 seed and favored in their first round. First being the Lakers a couple of years ago against the Suns. They didn't actually end up winning that series. That was when Phoenix went to the NBA Finals. But it just shows how rare it is that these 7 seeds are actually as good as this Warriors team is. It's only happened twice since the turn of the century that a 7 seed has beaten a 2 seed. Lakers did it in 2023, beating the Grizzlies, and in 2010, the Spurs beat the Mavs. Any thoughts about betting odds or any angles that you're thinking of playing?
I do think the Warriors probably should be favored in this series. I think just because of their experience, and they do have a little bit more star power. I do think it makes sense that this series could go 6. This series sets up very similarly to that Memphis Lakers series in the sense of there's a young 2 seed that's got a little cockiness to him, facing an aging superstar, an aging legend who's still trying to get one last go at it. And I think also this series could look a lot like the Warriors-Grizzlies series in 2022, where the Warriors are going to take one on the road and probably win all their home games and maybe get blown out in one road game. I don't know why, but for some reason I've got Dubs in 5. I think that is going to be wrong. My biggest thing is I think if the Warriors take game 1 on the road and put the Rockets into scramble mode, I don't know how they're going to handle it.
Interesting. So you got Warriors in 5. Who's your X factor?
It's funny. Earlier in the pod, I said it was Moody, but I think a big key is going to be Quentin Post. I like his game. I like what he gives to this team. And I think if he knocks down some shots and gives this team some energy, that's going to be huge for them.
I was thinking about putting Post there. I'm glad I didn't, so we could have a little bit of difference of opinion. I have the Dubs winning, not very surprisingly. It's the Dubs podcast. I don't think we're going to be predicting them to lose, but I have them winning in 6. So going back to San Francisco, I wouldn't be surprised, like you said, if they just get completely blown out one game and they show out flat and the Rockets are high energy. I hope that's not game 1, but even if it is game 1 or game 2, I don't think, like we saw in 2022, they lost by 40 to the Grizzlies and then came back the next night and won the series. So just because they might have an imbalanced game or 2, like I still see them winning the series, and having game 6 at home, I think is going to be really important. Hopefully they're up 3-2 at that point. My X factor, and this might be a little bit of a hot take, is Jonathan Kuminga. I really do see him playing this series. I know what you said about Tim Kawakami, who's not my favorite Bay Area sports reporter. He's as big of a hater as I think it gets. But like we touched on, he had some of his best games against the Rockets, and I don't think that was by accident. I think his play style and what the Warriors are going to be lacking is kind of his perfect archetype, an athlete, a guy who can switch on defense, who can create his own shot, gets points in the paint. I think that's going to be really important. And egg on my face, I might look like an idiot if through 2 games he hasn't played, or in game 1 he's missing assignments and then he just doesn't come back again. But I really think he's going to be an important guy. If the Warriors are able to do what we both think that they're able to do you think they can win the West?
I think as long as you have Steph on your team, it's on the table. And I think the addition of Jimmy makes it even more possible. It's going to be difficult, especially as a 7 seed. But if anyone could do it, I think it would be this Warriors team. I think they're on the right side of the bracket. They don't have to see OKC in a potential second round series. If they win this series, they see either the Lakers or Minnesota. And I think those are both beatable teams. Obviously, I'd rather them see Minnesota, but I think they can beat the Lakers. And then, if they get to the conference finals and it is OKC, they have matched up with them well the last couple of years. And that's another young team. They've only played in a couple playoff series. And so most of those guys never really been to the conference finals. The lights could be a little bright. And I think Steph has had some great moments in OKC. And so that would probably be a great series. If they can get there, anything's possible.
I'm glad you brought up the bracket, because I was looking at the other day once they beat the Grizzlies. And honestly, if I could choose the Warriors spot, excluding being the number 1 seed, I think I would choose exactly where they are because they play a young, inexperienced Houston team in round one. Then it's either an older Lakers team or a Timberwolves team, which I think has a lot of flaws. I think Anthony Edwards is awesome, but I think the Warriors would match up pretty well against him and beat him 3 out of 4 times this season. And then, like you said, the Thunder are still the heavy favorites, prohibited favorites. I think about a 60% implied probability that they win the West. And the Warriors match up really well against them. I would be a little concerned about their ability to just go back and forth with Chet and Isaiah Hartenstein. And those are two great bigs who are able to block shots and just kind of be a pest inside. I do think the Warriors have a really good shot to win the West. Not really good in the sense that I would pick it with even odds, but right now they have the third highest odds of winning the West, 12% chance, about plus 950. Thunder, like we mentioned, are prohibited favorites, 60%. The Lakers just ahead of them at 13%, and they have better odds than the Nuggets. They have better odds than the Rockets, the Timberwolves. So I think sports books and odds makers are kind of just telling us how they feel about the Warriors. And I think part of it is how talented they are, and I think part of it is the path that they have to make the finals. So many of the best teams in the West are on the other side of the bracket against them. I would rather play the Rockets and Lakers, or the Rockets, Lakers, and Timberwolves than the Nuggets or the Clippers or the Thunder. Like you said, they wouldn't have to play till round 3. So I think that's going to be huge for them. I personally have a Warriors to win the West betting ticket the day they traded for Jimmy Butler at 29-1, I want to say. So I will be purchasing an NBA Finals ticket if I'm able to cash that one in.
And for me, honestly, I also hope they make the finals because I do believe that I'd probably get a chance to work some of those games.
Oh,
So
that's
I'm
awesome.
Like, please.
Seriously, man. Free too. I mean, or not even free. You're probably getting paid a little bit too. So
Yeah. Speaking of, I will be getting paid to be at Game 4 of this series and get a nice up close look at it. So I'm looking forward to it.
that's awesome. What are you doing there? Are you doing scoreboard operations?
No, I'm working with the Rockets broadcast, doing some pretty basic stuff. Honestly, I'll probably have a lot of time to just kind of watch the game.
Can you mess around with the Rockets broadcast at all? Maybe pull the mic or.
I mean, I could, but I like my job.
Fair
so
enough.
I'm not gonna do that.
Fair enough. Probably not worth losing your job just to pull a little prank on Houston. And
Yeah.
fair enough. Yeah, man, I think this is everything I had regarding Warriors. We'll do this again. Hopefully, we're previewing a Lakers or Timberwolves round 2 series shortly. Anything else you want to plug?
I don't know when this podcast will be up, so you probably miss what I'm doing today, which is sadly my last broadcast with Academy of Art University. They recently announced that they're cutting their sports. A bittersweet moment for me there, and then a couple of send-offs for the 2 universities that I do play-by-play for. So also, if anybody listening to this needs a play-by-play announcer, I am available. So
Yeah, if any of our 50 to 60 listeners hear this, my guy Satchel is a fantastic play-by-play announcer. He's hopefully going to be working in the bigs soon enough, whether that's in professional or even, ACC. I was going to say Pac-12, Big 10, Big 12 broadcast. So yeah, Satchel, this is awesome. We'll do this again. Go Dubs. So you got Warriors in 5. I got Warriors in 6. We shall see. Talk soon, man.
can't wait for Sunday.
Can't wait for Sunday. Go Dubs. All right.
Go
See you,
Dubs.
man.
All right, man.
Now, if you made it to the end of the episode, I want to say thank you. If you don't mind subscribing and maybe even dropping a like, you'll become my new best friend. I produce these Bay Area sports podcasts twice a week, and I'm looking to grow my audience as much as I can. You can find the audio version of the podcast on Spotify or Apple Pods at the Bay Area Beat, and on YouTube at Bay Area Beat. You can also find short clips on all socials under the same name. Thanks again for listening. Catch you all next week.